I never believed in ghosts until I came face to face with one.
So it is the day after us being able to experience going into an abandoned asylum. I didn't get the chance to record because they didn't want us recording anything inside. We could take pictures, but we were only allowed to take pictures in certain rooms, and I didn't want to keep asking, hey, is this room okay or nah? So I didn't take any of those either. We went on this ghost tour that was decently expensive, as you can imagine, because
it was like $100
yeah,
for the
like
two of us total.
And it was just us that went. We didn't bring anybody along like we planned, which probably worked out a lot better than we expected. There is an abandoned asylum in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which we live like an hour away from. And this was the first year ever that people were allowed to come and investigate outside of like the one group that is allowed.
No, it wasn't their first year.
Well, when I read the thing for this year, it said that this was the first time that the public would be able to investigate it and check it out. So that's what I'm going off of, because that is what drew me in, because I thought this was going to be, this is a one-time offer type of thing. You won't be able to get it anywhere else. And anyways, the paranormal group that we were investigating with, they're the only ghost hunters. That's Vanilla in the background. They're the only people allowed inside. So they hosted this little event where they take you inside and you're ghost hunting basically. Like, you're sitting down in different areas in the building and they're recording like EVPs and stuff, and they use the spirit box and they use special lighting and all of that. They ask the ghost questions, and we're really big fans of paranormal spoopy stuff, so we thought it was right up our alley. Right away when we got there, it was very intimidating. It's a really big building.
It's over 10,000 square feet or something like that.
It's very big and it's very impressive, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Like, when I first drove past it while I was at work, I was like, oh, driving through the country, and I was like, oh, holy shit. That's a big complex to just have in the middle of nowhere.
And then you found out it was actually a spoopy asylum that was abandoned. Right before we left, we did smudge ourselves with sage, white sage. We didn't want to chance anything, I guess you could say. When we got there, it was extremely cold outside, and it really didn't make a difference when we got inside the building. There was like a tent that they had, and there was a heater, and that was kind of warm inside. But other than that, the whole majority of the time we're there, we're freezing our asses off. At least I was. Chandler's feet were the only thing really affected while we were there. And it was just my whole body. There was a few times where I was just like violently convulsing in shivers. It could have been a mixture of being cold and my nerves, because I know when I get super anxious or nervous, I'll shake like violently. Right away when we got started on the tour, we went upstairs and we kind of just sat up in like a little area in the building.
Yeah.
People brought chairs. We didn't know we could bring chairs. It was whatever, because we prepared to be like standing and walking around that whole entire part of the night, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, it just kind of sucked towards the end after standing for 4 hours.
Yeah. Dude was asking questions and whatever, and nothing was really going on. Like, some people on the other side that we were facing, our group was facing down two different wings, so we were like kind of in this corner area. We were facing down one, and then the other people were facing down the other, and I guess they're getting more activity down there. Like, they could see things, they could hear some bangs. Since we weren't really getting anything there, we moved on to the next area, which was definitely more high in activity.
That's when I and one of the other women that was there started like seeing shit pretty regularly, actually.
They'd ask them like questions, or like, if like, can you make a noise, can you make a sound, can you tap on the wall, and we were definitely hearing that, and they seemed to be in response to us when we'd ask certain questions. There's banging on like pipes and keep in mind, this place it's been abandoned since 2002, and on top of it, the only thing that works in it is the electricity. All the plumbing is turned off except for in one bathroom in the basement, like all the way in the back.
Yeah, 3 stories below us and on the other end of the building, basically, was the only working plumbing.
So we're definitely getting a lot of activity. Some lady who is sitting in a chair next to me, who is a part of the crew, was seeing like figures down the hall. It was just crazy how much activity was going down there. And I want to add that on the first floor we were on, the dude pulled out the spirit box, and for the sake of not just calling him the dude, his name was Craig. He pulled out the spirit box on the first floor we were on, and there was nothing. It was like dead, just the white noise of constantly. There's no like voices coming through it. And then when we were on this next floor and he pulled it out, there were actual voices that communicated with us, and they were giving their names. I thought that was really cool, because like just the difference in between the 2 floors and the activity.
Absolutely. It's kind of trippy too. Like she said, it's the first time we heard him pull out the spirit box, it just was like a white noise generator almost. But then the second time, you could hear like words. The
spirit box, for those of you who don't know, they don't stay on there for a second. It's literally like that's how fast it scans through the different channels. So it doesn't give you the chance to actually hear full audio in the stations. There's voices like Steve was coming through the box, and a man named Billy.
Yeah, the group that we were with, because it was us and this paranormal group and maybe 10 to 15.
Yeah, 10 to 15 or 20 at max, but there's no more than 20
but
in our group.
So we went up to this new floor, and our group split in half. So I can't say for sure if I heard actual voices of the other half of our group in a different part of the floor, or if it was spirits, but it was definitely spooky.
That was something that I didn't know how to bring up to the group, but I noticed, and that was the fact that you would hear like talking or voices, and you couldn't really tell if like it's just the thinness of the walls, or if the walls are even thin enough for you to hear someone like on other levels or anything like that, because I realized that when we were on the 3rd floor, which is the highest floor you can go on, I was hearing like walking, like kind of like thumping upstairs, like someone was walking and like maybe talking. I thought that there was another level upstairs, and we were just hearing like another group up there, because we had our own group with our own paranormal investigator people, and then there was a second group of like 20 or so people investigating different parts. I thought it was possibly them, and then I found out that we were on the highest floor. After that, they brought us to this floor, and there was like a nurse's office and like different surgery rooms. Pretty much gave us like a recess in that hallway where they were just like, oh, you guys go walk around the rooms, but don't touch anything and don't take pictures in this floor. I think they said that some of the ghosts don't like it. So we did that, and it was just eerie because there were a lot of like surgical like chairs. There was one old wheelchair in one of the rooms just like by itself, and that made me feel really uneasy. Just being in the nurse office was so like retro and so weird to see.
There was one point where Craig went, like we were standing at one end of the hallway and Craig went into the other end of the hallway, and all of a sudden we hear like the call alarm for like a patient to be calling for a nurse.
Yeah, and it was ringing like in the nurse's office, and she's on the other side of the hallway.
And everybody's like, oh shit, what's going on?
Oh my god.
And then Craig's like, oh, I just wanted to test to see if it was working. And I was like, oh, you're a dick.
I think you made the comment of, that would have been like the best evidence we got all day or all night. So after that, we went down to the main entry floor where the heating tent is set up, and we took a short break until
just to warm up a little bit.
Yeah, some people could get off their feet.
Just for reference, it was like 34 degrees in the building.
And cold spots.
And there were open windows, so like the outside wind was coming through.
I think before we took the recess, we went in it wasn't the morgue, but it was the wall on the other side of the morgue.
Yeah.
We were in some basement, and there was like a
conveyor.
A conveyor for, bodies. That's when we were getting like heat spikes. It was a minimal spike, but it was still there. And the motion light went off by itself.
They had one of those devices where, like, if a spirit or entity gets close to it, the lights go off on it. He'd been setting it up in every room that we'd been to, and it never went off. But in this room in particular, it went off at least 2 or 3 times separately. It would come on for a few seconds and then go off seemingly on its own, and nobody was moving around close to it in the room. The people that were setting up the equipment, as we found out later, they know how far to set these things away from everybody so that we don't set it off with our own presence.
The temperature in the room was going up, but it also could have been the heat coming off of us, because it was a very small room and we were kind of cramped into it.
Because it was only the temperature only went up by like 1 degree in the 10 minutes we were sitting in that room.
Smaller number was the one that was going up, and that's the one we could notice.
Yeah.
Or it was more notable. And then we took the recess, the break, and then we went right into the basement, I think, right?
Yeah, and we stood in the maintenance tunnels of the building,
which were fucking huge and very intimidating. Like, these wings were like kind of creepy. Some of the hallways were a little narrow, and it just, like, when you went down them, it just felt like there were things like just crowded like on your sides. Like, I honestly felt like I was going to be grabbed from either side when I walked down the narrow hallways. It was just like a very, I want to say, claustrophobic feeling, just because it felt like there were people on either side. When we went into the basement, the first thing we came across was the elevator that goes like right across to the morgue. We weren't allowed to go into the morgue just because I think it was like a danger with the elevator.
But we were allowed to go in the morgue. I don't know, I felt like it was rushed, like he preferred if we didn't go in there, kind of thing.
Which was stupid because the end of the tour ended up being such a letdown anyhow.
Yeah. He also said it was very small. Like 2 or 3 of us could go into the morgue at a time. Just didn't seem like he wanted us to spend any time by the morgue, which was stupid because, like, before we even started the tour, he was like, oh, this will be probably the first and only time that the morgue would be open, and he showed us where it is, and then they led on to it being just like the super cool thing that we'd be able to have access to the morgue, and then we'd,
oh, no one's ever been able to see the blah blah blah, and it's finally opened up to us, and you're the first group to be able to experience. And then it was like we got to see it through the elevator, but you couldn't see shit because it was so dark.
But it sounded like the other group went into it, so cool for them.
Yeah, whatever. Oh well. But I guess there's attacks in it, so.
Yeah. The previous group, because we were the second of 2 groups to go in there, apparently there were people getting scratched and somebody got punched in the eye by a ghost or something by the morgue.
We kind of moved along through the tunnelage of the basement, which they were in fact underground like tunnels. It was just so dark.
Like cave black.
That's the way to the bathroom, the only working bathroom. So everyone kind of took a bathroom break. Me and Chandler were solid because we're not pussies. Just kidding. I probably should have gone because I had to really go before we left. So we sat in this kind of cramped little corridor that breaks off into 3 sections.
Yeah.
He was asking questions. We weren't really getting anything, so we whipped out the spirit box and it was going through the channels, and there was so much talking. Like, they were all just overlapping each other.
It seemed like there was another 20 or 30 people in our group once that box came on.
It was a lot. I think he said he knew of the ghost that kept talking because it went by Sid or Sydney, and I remember you asking, oh, is Sydney the deep voice? And then Craig was like, oh no, he's with me.
I don't know if that's like his personal spirit that follows him around.
Right, I don't know if he knows
something.
It's like a non-hostile spirit, or if he actually knew the person and that person just happens to be there or even follow him directly. But we kept getting this really deep voice over the spirit box that we were not hearing prior to that.
And Craig even made a comment. Him and his team have investigated this place a handful of times throughout the years. He made a comment of this deep voice being the first time he's ever heard this deep voice. He attributed it to possibly being because the morgue was open. He and the rest of the group seemed very unnerved by this deep voice's presence.
It was a very unwelcoming voice. So we're going through the spirit box and we're talking to the ghosts, and we hear Sydney say his name many times, and we're hearing the deep voice, and Craig is trying to call out the voice and being like, who are you? Like, we've never heard you before. Like, what's your name? And it wasn't very clear, but he thought the voice said Legion. And right at that moment, he was like, I think it said this. I hope it didn't. And I was like, God, no, I hope it didn't, because that is not a good sign. And then he asked again, who are you? And it said Satan. There was a few people that just got so unnerved. Craig kept feeling like touching on his face. A few other people experienced different, like, I guess like the cobweb feeling.
In the basement, we were getting some very creepy audio coming out. Besides Legion and Satan coming through, there were a couple times where the spirits, I think, said something about like we should leave, we're in danger.
Vanilla has entered the chat.
The basement was definitely a really active spot for us. At that first spot that we went to, where we didn't get anything coming through at all, really, I called out at one point that it smelled like sulfur. I was like, oh, I don't know if anybody like passed gas or something, but it kind of smells like sulfur over here. And Craig made a comment. He was like, oh, well, there aren't any demons here. I wouldn't bring groups here if there were demons. And then to have those experiences in the basement, the investigators weren't expecting it either.
There was one investigator that actually had to move over by us because she was sitting in one of the entry hallways and she just did not feel alright. And after that, the lady who was now at that end by herself also got really creeped out and like didn't feel right and wanted to move and didn't want to be like isolated by herself because it was creepy down there. And then there was this the one hallway we didn't take because one was it led to the upstairs, and then the other one led to the bathroom, and then there was one that led upwards that I don't remember, but one of the investigators told us that if you stand with your back facing it, you can actually hear like something like running up behind you or like coming up behind you. And
you'll feel somebody, like a presence standing right up behind you.
Breathing like on the back of your neck. Like, But yeah, then after that we went up to the chapel. We were in an area that we did not go through before, and there was a bunch of like painting on the walls, like
it looked
rainbows.
like a daycare center for kids.
It did. It looked like an area for kids, or at least maybe for those not all together. And there were even height measurements on some of the pillars.
With like names written next to them and stuff.
So then we go off into this room that's by all that stuff. It was the chapel. It just didn't feel right, at least for me and a few other people. I don't know if you got the same feeling, but it just didn't feel right. Granted, I don't care for like church settings in general because I personally don't find them very safe, and I don't find a lot of religious things comforting when you're scared or going up against demons.
It definitely didn't really feel like a chapel place. When you walk in, and there's nothing really unique about it where you could tell, like, oh, this was the chapel. It was just like every other room. The investigators mentioned that in that particular room, they often got EVPs that were very aggressive.
Like bitch, cunt, whore. We did do a voice box in there, but from what I remember, we didn't really get much that I could coherently understand. Some of the ladies actually felt like something followed us from the basement.
Some of the people in our group kept mentioning that they saw orbs going past the entrance to the chapel as well. The whole time I was standing in that room, it just felt like someone was just right around the corner of the door.
And I forgot to mention that in the basement, I felt like a pressure on like the right side of my ribs, my right rib cage area, and I just kind of blew it off. It was one I had never really felt like that before. And then when we went on to the chapel, there were actually a few people experiencing that. So then I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't write this off right away. I just didn't feel welcomed in the chapel. There were times where I felt weird sensations down my thighs, like up my thighs and upwards. Then I got the worst pain in my right breast, specifically my right nipple. It hurt, like and we were like close together, like he was like holding me and whatever, because it was cold and a lot of the stuff was unnerving after the basement. There were a few fits where I was just like rubbing at my chest because it hurt, and I figured that would help, and it kind of did, but it lasted like a minute or two, and it kind of came and went, and I was like, well, I definitely don't want to write this off, because I don't just have random pains like that. I felt like there was something just not great in that room. I felt like it was something dark, and there were actually a few times where I'd go into a room or like an area we're in, and it's just like I get hit with this, I get sent back into that time period feeling of when it's back in its prime, and there are people and sun coming through the windows and everything, and that was, the chapel was one of the rooms where I got that, and it didn't seem light at all. It seemed very dark and just unhappy. When you think of asylums like that, mental asylums, you're unhealthy in the head and you're trapped in a place with people who might not be kind to you at all, because back in the day when mental asylums were in their prime of
when they were the accepted form of care for mental patients, because this property was built in the 1980s. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was built in the 1940s. It wasn't the first iteration of that building we learned either. It was the third. The original building was about 5 miles down the road, and that building had been destroyed once and then rebuilt, and then they ran out of space and moved to the building that we were in somewhere in the 1940s. You could only imagine the patients, how they were being treated.
And that came from a time where there weren't a whole lot of bright white souls that actually cared for people with mental illness, because compared to now, it was such a burden for people to take care of people with mental illness like that, people who were not mentally stable at all. Living there, being there, must have been a living hell. So you can imagine that a lot of the people who ended up passing did not go with a very healthy, happy mindset. They could have come back as something darker. They could have brought something darker. Then we left the chapel. I'm not sure where we went after the chapel, if we took another recess.
After the chapel, that's when they were starting to run out of ideas, it sounded like. I brought up standing by the morgue because I kept hearing all these stories from other people and from the investigative crew of like, oh, we got scratched, we got punched, we got, it just seemed like an unwelcoming place spiritually, and I was like, well, that sounds like a good place to like hear some stuff. The group that we were with was kind of into the idea. I heard people agreeing with me, but the investigators were kind of like hesitant about it, and we didn't even spend much time investigating there, but the time that we did spend, we didn't really get anything there. The spirit box was silent. We had some
EMF detector?
We had some readings on the EMF detector, which was the first time that that device had shown any activity, and I didn't even know we were using one until we were by the morgue.
It was one of the ladies that came to the group. It wasn't an investigator.
Oh, gotcha. It was hers personally.
Yeah.
But the paranormal crew seemed quick to try to debunk it as just being people's phones in their pockets.
Yeah.
As far as we can be certain, we got nothing from the morgue, but we also spent maybe 5 minutes there, as opposed to the 10 to 20 minutes we spent everywhere else.
Then we took another break to warm up and whatever. A lot of people at this point were leaving because it was late, it was cold, and it was late. People were tired. Some people wanted to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah, we were there from 10:30 till 2 in the morning.
Craig ended up staying behind. So 8 people and an investigator went up to one of the floors that I guess was like active. It definitely seemed like it was the place where, because later on, before the building was abandoned, it was an old folks home. That's what it felt like, at least when we went up there, because it didn't seem like asylum-esque.
No, it was, as they called it, the living quarters. The room that we were investigating in, it seemed very much like a multi-purpose room. There was like an old piano, some couches. It led off into like a dining room-esque area.
With a kitchen. It was just very dead and uninteresting when we went up there. According to them, they actually get a lot of activity. There's this German man named Herman, and
he used to be the superintendent of the building.
And we also couldn't sit on the furniture. I think you said that, but if we sat on the furniture, the spirits wouldn't like it, and I think there would be like a tax, so we weren't able to change that. But when she whipped out the spirit box and had that going, we heard voices every now and then, but like she said that it sounded mostly like it was in German, which, you know, was what he spoke, aside from English. I would hope if he was a super German. Oh, Vanilla wants pets. Oh, baby, white baby. Vanilla's the star of the show. She wants attention. But other than that, we really didn't get anything other than like the German voice. Everyone just seemed so tired at this point. We only had a few people. We kind of stayed just to get like our full money's worth.
Yeah.
Other than that, like it just seemed like we were all really exhausted and ready to go. We were cold. There was a lot of stairs too. Yeah. So that wore a lot of people out. One thing I didn't mention is that they didn't have record on who had all passed away there. Clearly there were people like patients, elderly, that must have passed, but they didn't have names. But there were 3 nurses that hung themselves.
Was it 3? I thought it was 7.
They said 3 when we were in the second location. If it's 7, then that's even worse.
Right.
A place full of a lot of tragedy and sadness.
There were times when I tried to make suggestions, and granted, you know, I'm the outside guy that just paid to investigate with them. But like in the second location, when we were getting activity in the one wing and not the other wing, I suggested, I was like, oh, well, why don't we move like the pill over where we're getting activity? I bet we'd get some response. The lights would probably go off because there's stuff.
You pretty much just got like a yeah response, but like no action towards it.
Yeah.
I think it's just because they had a lot planned, but then when there were areas that were not as highly active as say they would have been with like a group before us, it was kind of like a buzzkill, a waste of time kind of thing, but it's not like they can control that.
But it just felt like they were really unreceptive.
I feel like instead of the living quarters, they should have ended with the nurses' quarters, because there was a lot of the female investigators that were like, oh, we should go up there because blah blah blah. So I'm assuming that's where like the nurses might have committed suicide.
The only investigator that wanted to do anything still wanted to go to the living quarters. There was also a time earlier in the investigation, because we did this on Daylight Savings Day, where the clocks were going to be set back an hour. We'd paid to investigate from 10:30 to 2:30, but with the clocks being set back, 2:30 actually was still 1:30.
So we would have gotten an extra hour.
Yeah.
But at that end point, we were just like, hey, we're done. We're ready to go. And that was pretty much everyone's thought process on that.
The investigators were also they'd been there since 7, so they were kind of like, oh, we've spent a whole work day here.
Yeah, and it's a lot, because like not only do they have to go up and down the stairs, give the tours, do whatever, but they also have to unset up their tent and their heating system they got going on, and all their food and stuff, and pack up. So like,
and some of them lived like 2 hours away.
Yes. After that last little break and we went up to the living quarters, I was so ready to just go. I was like, you know, I'm pretty solid. This was an experience, but I'm good with leaving.
Yeah.
The living quarters too, I had that weird vision of seeing it in the daytime, and it's all set together. You see people in it, see elderly people, and it's just a weird retro feeling. I'm glad we got to experience it. It was really cool at times and really creepy at others, but one and done type of thing, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have any urge to go back.
Yeah.
It's not like there was anything super compelling that happened that night where I'd be like, oh, I'd totally go back there and see if we can get more evidence.
Yeah, if it was just like you, me, and like a group of our friends and we were investigating whatever we'd find, like we'd follow the sounds like you said you wanted to. We'd do that, ride that shit out, but other than that, you're stuck with the group and you kind of have to play by what they're doing. I feel like that kind of scenario can only happen in one place once. You know, like you take a tour of something, you don't tend to take another tour of the same place another time.
Yeah.
Like you already know, you've already seen it.
Right.
At that point, you just kind of wander on your own, but in this case, we can't do that. If we really wanted to go back, I'm sure we could, but I'm solid. I'm glad we went.
Same. I don't regret the money spent, and I had fun with the time that we were there. We did learn that they do these kind of guided ghost tour things at other locations. So we might do another location in the
Near
future.
We didn't get scratched or anything. All that I told on here was all that I experienced with like the pains and the pressures and whatever. And there was one time where we were in the basement and my back kind of felt like the cobwebby feeling. Anything good and protective that I could think of came with me. I think that's pretty much what sums up our experience at the Sheboygan Asylum, abandoned asylum in Sheboygan.
If you like videos like this, maybe you'll see more.
Bye!